I never believed in haunted houses. Even now, after everything that happened in that apartment outside Bremen, I still don't know if haunted is the right word. Maybe some places just remember things. Maybe walls absorb fear the way old wood absorbs moisture. Or maybe there are sounds no human being is supposed to hear. This happened in late November of 2023, during one of the coldest weeks Germany had seen that year. I was 27 and working remotely as a graphic designer. My company allowed me to work from anywhere, so after a breakup and a pretty bad depressive period, I decided to leave Hamburg and rent somewhere quieter for a few months. I found an old 2-story house divided into apartments on the outskirts of Bremen. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but I didn't care. The listing described it as historic and peacefully isolated. In reality, it sat at the end of a narrow road surrounded by leafless trees and empty fields. The house itself looked older than the photos online. The paint peeled from the walls, and the gutters sagged downward like they were barely hanging on. There were only 3 apartments total. Mine was on the top floor. The landlord, a thin man named Herr Albrecht, barely spoke during the viewing. He unlocked the front door, showed me upstairs, and kept glancing at his watch. The apartment itself was decent enough. Old wooden floors, slanted ceilings, radiators that clanged loudly whenever they turned on. But it had a strange smell. Not mold, not rot, just old air, like a room sealed shut for decades. I asked if anyone else lived there.
"Ground floor," he said. "An older woman." "What about the other apartment?" He hesitated. "Empty." I signed the lease the same day. The first week was normal. I unpacked, bought groceries, explored Bremen during the afternoons, and spent nights gaming or working. The old woman downstairs occasionally nodded at me in the hallway, but she never spoke. The noises started on the 8th night. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I woke up to a sound directly above me. 3 slow knocks. Thunk, thunk, thunk. I opened my eyes immediately. The ceiling above my bed was slanted wood from the attic space above the apartment. There wasn't supposed to be anyone up there.
I listened carefully. Silence. Then another sound. Dragging. Like something heavy being pulled slowly across the attic floor. I sat upright. The sound continued for maybe 15 seconds before stopping completely. At first, I assumed it was old pipes or the house settling. Old buildings make strange noises, especially in winter. I managed to fall back asleep. The next night, it happened again. 2:13 a.m. 3 knocks, dragging. This time, I checked my phone immediately because the timing felt too exact to be coincidence. I listened from bed, trying to figure out what it could be. Rats, maybe. Or branches scraping the roof. Then I heard something else. Breathing. Very faint. Above me. I froze completely. It sounded like someone slowly inhaling through their nose. Then exhaling. The dragging stopped, but the breathing remained for another few seconds before disappearing. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I asked Herr Albrecht if workers had access to the attic. "No," he said instantly. "So nobody goes up there?" "No reason to." "Then what's above my ceiling?" "Storage." He said it too quickly. I told him about the sounds. His expression changed immediately, but only for a second. "It's an old house," he said. "You'll get used to it." Then he ended the conversation and walked away. That should have been enough for me to leave, but I didn't. Part of me was curious. A bigger part didn't want to admit I was scared of noises in an attic. So that night, I stayed awake intentionally. At 2:12 a.m., I sat in bed with all the lights off, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was dead silent. Then, thunk. The first knock nearly made me jump out of my skin. Thunk, thunk, directly above me. The dragging started immediately afterward, much louder this time. I grabbed my phone flashlight and slowly stood up. The attic access hatch was in the hallway outside my bedroom. I remember staring at it while the sound continued above me. Slow scraping, heavy, deliberate. I should have ignored it. Instead, I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and climbed up beneath the hatch. The noises stopped instantly. Not gradually. Instantly. Like whatever was up there had heard me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached up and touched the small metal handle, ice cold. I pulled the hatch open. A folding ladder creaked downward. The smell hit me first. Dust, wet wood, and something sour underneath it. I pointed my flashlight upward. The attic was enormous, stretching across the entire house. Thick wooden beams crossed overhead, and old furniture sat beneath white sheets covered in dust. For a few seconds, nothing looked unusual. Then my flashlight moved to the far right corner. There was a chair there, facing me. I don't mean positioned randomly. I mean perfectly facing the attic hatch like someone had been sitting there watching it, watching me. I felt this horrible crawling sensation move through my chest. "Hello?" I called weakly. No response. I climbed up slowly. Every step made the ladder groan loudly beneath me. The attic floor creaked under my weight as I looked around. My flashlight shook slightly in my hand. The chair was old and wooden, with scratches all over the legs, and beside it fresh marks on the dust-covered floor. Dragging marks, like the chair had recently been moved. I backed away immediately. That's when I heard the breathing again, behind me. Not loud, just close. Extremely close. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing. But I swear the air behind me felt warmer for a second. I practically ran back down the ladder and slammed the hatch shut. The dragging noises didn't happen again that night. Neither did the breathing. But from that moment on, the atmosphere in the apartment changed completely. I started noticing things. Small things at first. Cabinet doors left open. Lights switched on after I knew I turned them off. My bathroom mirror fogging slightly, even when no hot water was running. I told myself stress was making me paranoid. Then came the sound. The real sound. 3 nights later, I woke up at 2:13 again. Except this time there were no knocks, no dragging, just a noise I still can't describe properly. The closest comparison would be metal scraping against concrete. But wetter, uneven, almost human. It came from directly above my bedroom ceiling. Screech. Then silence. Then again. Screech. I covered my ears instinctively. The sound physically hurt to listen to. It vibrated through the ceiling and into my chest. Then something else mixed into it. A voice. Not words. Just a low, broken mumbling beneath the scraping noise. I turned on every light in the apartment. The sound stopped immediately. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next day, I knocked on the old woman's door downstairs. She opened it only halfway. Before I even spoke, she said, "You hear it too now?" I remember feeling cold all over. "You know about the noises?" She stared at me for several seconds before nodding. "It likes the upper apartment." "What likes it?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked, "Have you heard the scratching yet?" I said yes. Her face tightened instantly. "You should leave." I laughed nervously. "What is this? Some kind of local ghost story?" "No." She shook her head slowly. "Something happened up there years ago." I asked her what she meant, but she refused to elaborate. She only repeated the same thing before shutting the door. "You should leave before it starts calling your name." That sentence stayed in my head the entire day. I barely focused on work. By evening, I'd convinced myself the old woman was mentally ill or trying to scare me. But deep down, I knew the fear I felt wasn't normal. That night, I locked my bedroom door. At 2:13 a.m., the knocking returned. Only this time it wasn't above me. It came from inside the apartment. 3 knocks from the hallway. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. Then silence. I stared at the bedroom door for what felt like forever. Then scratch. Something dragged slowly across the hallway floor outside my room. The exact same sound from the attic, except now it was inside the apartment. I grabbed my phone and whispered, "Who's there?" No response. The dragging continued, slowly approaching my bedroom door. I could hear wood scraping against wood. Then the breathing started again. Right outside. Long inhale, slow exhale. I wanted to call the police, but some irrational fear stopped me. I think part of me was terrified they'd arrive and find nothing. Then I heard something far worse. My own voice, outside the door, very quietly. "Lucas?" I stopped breathing completely. The voice sounded wrong, not like an impersonation, like a recording played through broken speakers. "Lucas." The doorknob moved slightly. I backed into the corner of my room, holding a heavy lamp like a weapon. The voice spoke again, closer this time. "Open the door." I can't explain the terror of hearing your own voice speak from the other side of a locked room. Then came the scratching, slow fingernails scratching against the wood. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. After maybe 20 seconds, it stopped. The hallway became silent again. I stayed awake until sunrise. The moment daylight appeared, I packed a bag and went downstairs to confront Herr Albrecht. But his apartment office was empty. I called him repeatedly. No answer. That afternoon, I searched the house online. I found almost nothing except an old local news article from 2009. A tenant had disappeared from the upper apartment. No signs of forced entry. No body ever found. According to the article, neighbors reported disturbing sounds from the attic in the weeks before he vanished. I felt sick reading it. Then I found another article. Different year, same apartment, another tenant. Also disappeared. That was when I finally decided to leave. I booked a hotel in Bremen for the night and returned to the apartment around 5 p.m. to collect the rest of my belongings. Everything seemed normal when I entered. Too normal. No noises, no strange smells. Nothing. I packed quickly, avoiding looking at the attic hatch. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The hatch was open, just slightly. A thin black gap stretched across the ceiling. I knew I had closed it. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring upward. Then slowly, something moved behind the gap. Not fully visible, just pale skin, like fingers curling around the edge from inside the attic. I grabbed my suitcase immediately, and then the sound started again. Screech! Directly above me, louder than ever before. The ceiling vibrated violently. Dust fell downward around me. Then came the dragging, fast this time, rushing across the attic directly overhead. I ran for the front door. Halfway there, something slammed heavily above me. The entire house shook. Then, "Lucas!" My own voice again. From the attic hatch. I looked back once. I wish I hadn't. The hatch had opened wider. And hanging partially through the darkness was a face. Not fully human. Its skin looked stretched tightly across the skull, pale gray in color, with an open mouth hanging unnaturally wide. But the eyes looked exactly like mine. I sprinted out of the apartment without another second wasted. I drove straight to the hotel and never returned, not even for the rest of my belongings. A week later, I emailed Herr Albrecht demanding answers. He replied only once. One sentence. "Some sounds are better ignored." That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing. A month later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the address online again. The apartment listing had returned. Same photos, same cheap price, but one detail was different. In one of the attic photos, barely visible in the background near an old wooden chair. There was someone standing there, watching the camera. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I zoomed in. The figure's face was blurry, but the clothes looked familiar. A dark winter hoodie, gray jeans. The exact outfit I'd left behind in the apartment the night I fled. I closed the laptop immediately. I haven't gone back to Bremen since. But sometimes, usually around 2 a.m., I wake up suddenly to strange noises in my apartment. 3 slow knocks, thunk, 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 and every single time for a few seconds after I wake up, I hear breathing somewhere above me. Back in 2021, I rented a house in northern Pennsylvania with 2 friends from college. We were all in our mid-20s, splitting rent while working different jobs nearby. The place wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, isolated, and big enough for the 3 of us. The house sat at the end of a long gravel road, surrounded by thick woods. The nearest neighbor was almost half a mile away. During the day, it looked peaceful. At night, it felt completely cut off from the world. The owner told us the house had been vacant for nearly 2 years before we moved in. At the time, that didn't seem important. The first month there was honestly great. We spent weekends drinking around a fire pit in the backyard, playing cards, watching football, and joking about how creepy the woods looked after dark. My roommates were named Tyler and Mason. Tyler worked night shifts at a warehouse, while Mason repaired HVAC systems during the day. I worked remotely from home doing customer support for a software company, meaning I was usually alone in the house for long stretches. The noises started small. The house was old, so hearing creaks at night wasn't unusual. Pipes rattled constantly, and the upstairs hallway made popping sounds whenever temperatures dropped. But sometime in early October, I started hearing a different sound. It always happened late at night. And it always came from the basement. At first it sounded like metal lightly tapping concrete. Clink, 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 not loud, just repetitive. I ignored it for several nights because I assumed Mason had left tools downstairs or something. Then one night around 1:30 a.m., the sound changed. Scrap! It sounded like something heavy dragging slowly across the basement floor. I paused my TV immediately. The sound stopped too. For a few seconds, the house became completely silent. Then came 3 loud bangs from directly below me. Bang, bang, bang. I nearly spilled my drink. I muted the television and listened carefully. Nothing. No movement, no scraping. The silence somehow felt worse. The basement door was located near the kitchen. I remember standing there staring at it while trying to convince myself it was probably just pipes or the water heater. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't normal. The next morning, I asked Tyler if he'd been downstairs late at night. No, he said. Why? I told him about the sounds. Instead of laughing, he got strangely serious. You heard dragging too? That immediately made my stomach tighten. What do you mean too? Tyler explained that he'd heard noises from the basement a few nights earlier after getting home from work around 3 a.m. He said it sounded like someone moving furniture downstairs. We both assumed Mason was messing around down there. But when Mason came home later that evening and we asked him, he looked genuinely confused. I haven't even gone into the basement since we moved in, he said. That night, the 3 of us stayed awake longer than usual. Nothing happened for hours. Around midnight, Tyler eventually went to bed, while Mason played Xbox in his room upstairs. I was alone in the living room watching YouTube when I heard it again. Clink, clink, clink. The sound came from beneath the floorboards. I muted the TV immediately. Scrap! Something dragged slowly across concrete downstairs. I called out toward the stairs. Mason, you downstairs? No response. Then came the banging again. Bang! 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 Louder this time, like someone hitting the basement ceiling directly beneath my feet. Mason came running downstairs seconds later, asking what the hell that noise was. The 2 of us stood there staring at the basement door in silence. Then we heard another sound, breathing, faint, but definitely human, on the other side of the basement door. Mason whispered, "Dude." The breathing grew heavier. Slow inhale, slow exhale. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. Tyler suddenly came rushing out of his room holding a baseball bat. "What's going on?" Before either of us answered, the doorknob to the basement twisted violently. All three of us jumped backward. The knob shook hard for maybe 5 seconds before stopping completely. Then silence. None of us opened the door. We stayed upstairs the rest of the night, pretending not to panic. The next morning, sunlight made everything feel stupid again. We laughed it off over coffee and convinced ourselves someone had probably broken into the basement somehow. So we finally decided to check it. The basement was unfinished, damp, and freezing cold. One exposed bulb hung from the ceiling, barely lighting the room. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. There were old shelves, boxes left behind by previous owners, and a rusted furnace near the back wall. But then Tyler noticed something. Drag marks on the floor. Fresh ones, long scrape lines across the dust-covered concrete. They led toward a narrow storage room in the far corner of the basement. The door to that room stood slightly open. I remember this horrible feeling hitting me as we stared at it. Not fear exactly, more like instinct. Like every part of my body was warning me not to look inside. Tyler pushed the door open slowly with the bat. The room was tiny and nearly empty except for old shelves and water stains on the walls. But there was one thing that immediately stood out. A chair, placed directly in the center of the room, facing the doorway. I know that doesn't sound terrifying written out like this, but something about it felt deeply wrong. It looked intentional, like somebody had been sitting there waiting. Mason laughed nervously and said, "Okay, screw this." We all went back upstairs. That should have been the end of it. Instead, things got worse almost immediately. Over the next week, the sounds became more frequent. Sometimes the scraping started before midnight. Other nights it happened at 3 or 4 in the morning. We began hearing footsteps too. Slow footsteps moving around directly beneath the living room floor. One night, Tyler swore he heard whispering coming through the basement vent near his bedroom. Another time, Mason claimed the basement door was open when he got home from work, even though we all remembered shutting it. The tension in the house changed completely. Nobody joked anymore, nobody stayed up alone, and nobody went downstairs after dark. Then came the night everything changed. Tyler was working late, meaning only Mason and I were home. At around 11 p.m., we were watching a movie upstairs when the power suddenly flickered. Not fully out, just enough to make the lights dim for a second. Then we heard the sound. Not scraping, not banging. A voice, very low, coming from downstairs. At first it sounded too muffled to understand. Then it got clearer. Someone was humming. A slow, uneven hum, like a person absent-mindedly singing to themselves. Mason muted the TV instantly. The humming continued. I remember staring at him while my chest tightened harder with every second. The voice sounded old, male, and extremely close. Then came footsteps, directly beneath us, slow, creaking steps moving across the first floor. Impossible. We were upstairs. There shouldn't have been anyone down there. Mason grabbed the fireplace poker from beside the TV. I picked up my phone, ready to call 911. Then we heard something that made both of us freeze completely. The humming stopped, and a voice downstairs quietly said, "I know you're awake." Every muscle in my body locked up. The voice sounded calm, almost amused. Then came laughter, soft at first, then louder. Not normal laughter either. It sounded strained and breathless, like someone laughing while trying not to cry. Mason whispered, "Call the cops." I started dialing. Then suddenly, bang! A violent crash echoed downstairs. followed by rapid footsteps sprinting across the first floor. We heard furniture slam over, cabinets opening,
Things breaking. It sounded like someone tearing through the house. Then silence. Complete silence. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers searched the entire property, including the basement. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no open windows, nothing stolen. One officer suggested raccoons in the walls until he saw the overturned kitchen chairs and shattered plates downstairs.
Even then, they still couldn't explain it. After they left, Tyler finally came home from work. We told him everything. Instead of brushing it off, he looked genuinely terrified. Then he admitted something he'd hidden from us. A few nights earlier, he'd woken up around 2 a.m. and seen someone standing at the end of the upstairs hallway. He assumed it was one of us at first, until the figure slowly crouched down onto all fours and crawled into the bathroom. By the time Tyler got the courage to check, the bathroom was empty. None of us slept that night. The next day, Mason contacted the homeowner demanding answers. At first, the guy acted confused. Then Mason mentioned the basement noises. The homeowner went quiet for several seconds. Finally, he admitted the previous tenant had mental health problems. That was all he'd say. But later that night, Tyler found something online. An old local article. A man had rented the house years earlier and become convinced someone lived beneath the basement. Neighbors reported hearing him scream at night about the thing copying voices. Eventually, police were called after he disappeared for several days. They found him locked inside the basement storage room, alone. According to the article, he refused to explain what happened down there. A month later, he died in a psychiatric hospital. We moved out 3 days after finding that article. But the final night in the house is the reason I still think about this story constantly. We had most of our stuff packed already. Tyler stayed at his girlfriend's place, leaving just Mason and me there overnight. Around 1 a.m., we were both awake in the living room when the basement door slowly creaked open by itself. Not slammed, not rattled, just slowly opening inch by inch. The light downstairs was off, pitch black. Mason stood up immediately. Then we heard it, a voice from the darkness below, mine, perfectly mimicking my voice. "Can you come down here?" I felt cold all over instantly. The voice came again, closer this time. "Eric!" Mason grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. Then another voice spoke from downstairs, Mason's voice. "Help me!" That was enough. We ran straight out of the house without even grabbing our keys. As we reached the driveway, I looked back toward the front door. And I swear to God, I saw someone standing inside the house watching us through the narrow glass beside the entrance. Tall, completely still, its head tilted slightly sideways. Even from that distance, I could tell one thing. It was smiling. We never went back alone after that. Tyler and Mason returned during daylight with Mason's cousins to collect the rest of our belongings. I refused to go inside again. To this day, I still avoid basements whenever possible. And sometimes late at night, especially when I'm alone, I hear faint sounds in my apartment that remind me of that house. Soft metal tapping, clink, 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 always followed by silence, like something waiting underneath the floor.